You're fine.
Okay, and action.
Alright, so in this presentation we're going to be talking about assisted reproduction, and we'll be going over the different technologies and purposes for assisted reproduction. And we'll also dive deep into all the different bioethics surrounding all the different aspects of this alternative to traditional insemination.
Okay, so terminology, the definition of assisted reproduction is basically an unnatural alternative for like if you're infertile or, you can't sexually, intercourse with people. Anyway, so these are the different types of assisted reproduction, and we're going to be going over them a lot. So these are like the little symbols for them, so we don't have to write it all out. And he'll go over them. There's different reasons for people to do assisted reproduction. Usually it's for infertile couples. And then the next one is to prevent like diseases that are transmitted through like AIDS and infection and cystic fibrosis, and then genetic reasons for like if you want your kid to look like me, everyone does, then you can do that. And you basically pick the traits that you want for your kid out of the gene pool, and you make them basically. And then it's for single parents who don't have a partner, and then for asexual and homosexual partners, which I'm pretty sure we all know what that is. So, there you go.
There are a few different technologies used in assisted reproduction. The first one is going to be in vitro fertilization. Now this procedure starts when a woman is in ovulation, and they will stimulate her ovaries to produce about 8 to 12 eggs. Now when those eggs are produced, they will remove them from the uterus with a syringe or their materials, and then they'll place them in a petri dish along with a sperm from a sperm donor. They will then wait for the insemination to take effect, for the egg to meet the sperm, and then they will remove the embryo, one embryo at a time, about 3 usually, and place them in the woman's uterus one at a time so that you don't have multiple births. And if she gets pregnant from one of those 3, then it's successful. Now, ICSI is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. The only difference with this, instead of placing the egg in a petri dish with the sperm is directly injected into the egg. And so then insemination takes effect. So this is a surefire way for the embryo to form. Now, cryopreservation is when they either freeze an embryo, an egg, or a sperm because they want it to stay fertile for a future, basically a future pregnancy birth. This can be used for people who don't want to really have kids until they're older and more financially stable with marriage and stuff, but they still want to have fertile eggs or embryos. The last one is IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. Now this one is to where a sperm donor is just injected into the uterus, and the insemination will take effect just like through sexual intercourse.
Cool. So, this is a pretty touchy subject, I think, depending on where you live in the world. So the five overall obstacles between you and assisted reproduction is religion, unnatural procedures, genetic selection, save your siblings, and excess embryos. So we're going to go into a couple of these more in depth, but for religion, it really depends. So you have, if you're in Asia, in Eastern Asia, a lot of the religions there, they say it's okay, they don't really care, it's not against their code of ethics, whatever. But if you go to a lot of Western cultures, so those are a lot more like traditional, like Catholicism and Christianity, they say it's wrong. They say that it kind of defiles what marriage is supposed to be. Instead of having one father and one mother, you've kind of polluted that, and now you have some extra person in the picture. And then for the Jewish church, they say it interferes with their line of genealogy. So you're not having a purebred Jew anymore. Similar, whatever. And then unnatural procedures. People, this is really not just a religious thing or a non-religious thing. People of all beliefs just think it's not right because it doesn't happen in nature. You don't see an animal If it doesn't, it's rare. And then genetic selection, like we talked about, if you want your baby to look like Kayla, a lot of people believe that that's wrong. You shouldn't be able to customize your baby. You shouldn't be able to choose, I want them to have brown eyes or blonde hair, or I want them to be tall, short, have fast metabolism, whatever. People just believe that's crossing the line. And then Saber siblings, I think out of all of them is the most agreed upon to be wrong, just because, like we've talked about, usually the baby that's donating, whatever it is, dies. And if they don't die, they might have less quality of life, or something will be wrong with them. So it's just, yeah, you're saving your child, but at the cost of another life. And then excess embryos, that's a lot similar. So what Presley was talking about, when they have, when the sperm has fertilized the egg, it's not just going to happen to one egg. There's going to be excess, and so a baby that would have lived is not going to die because they're just going to throw the rest away. They're just going to keep one of the embryos. Yeah. And so the first one we're going to go over is genetic selection. So yeah, genetically designed babies. No longer is nature taking place, and your baby's gonna really just take the traits of the parent. Instead, people usually with a lot of money get to kind of customize their baby, and so a lot of people think that's wrong. And like we said, where is the line drawn? Where does it? It could be used for a good purpose, like if you have a third-party donor, that way your baby won't have AIDS or your baby won't have cystic fibrosis. But now you are having a third-party donor, so your baby will be blonde or your baby won't be overweight. So people say that's just too far. It's crossing the line. Yeah, so it's good because you can help your future child in the way that they won't have this disease that is maybe positive to be passed down. But then a lot of people think it's too far when you start customizing for appearance.
So savior siblings are basically when you make a baby to save a child that's already born and living. So I give the child, say Presley was my child, and he had if he had really cancer or something, and he needed a cell transplant or an organ donation, then I, as the mother, would create, or people in the lab would create a baby inside of me that has the necessary means to cure Presley. And then I basically harvest those things from the kid. And if it was an organ, the kid would usually live, but there's psychological and physical damage. If you grow up knowing that you were only born to save a life and not because anyone wanted you, that's pretty harsh. But then some of the babies die because if you want a cell transplant, sometimes you have to kill a baby to save Presley. So yeah, most people think that it's wrong, but a lot of people think that it's okay because the life worth of Presley is, he's worthy of another life being sacrificed.
Savior siblings does get into some touchy subjects because you are talking about lives now instead of just what color hair or what color eyes your baby should have. But when you get into excess embryos, it really gets to almost like a violent subject because you are destroying embryos, which is basically what abortion is. Embryos are after conception has taken place between the sperm and the egg, so they have started to divide. The cells have started to divide. It is starting to develop into a baby. And so basically we're talking about the abortion conflict. Is that just cells or is that a baby? Now, basically excess embryos, during IVF, you have all these embryos that have started to form, and they're only going to really use about 3 of them to get the woman pregnant. After 3 tries, they're going to call that an unsuccessful attempt, and the rest of them will be disposed of. Now, the different ways that these labs go about doing this is they will have a few different choices for the parents. The parents are the ones who choose. They can either take home the embryos and bury them and have a funeral, they respect that, or they can choose to just destroy them in the lab. Or they can donate them to another woman that birthed and have that child, or they can give them up to stem cell research. And those are all the different options. Now, one thing about this is back a few years ago, there was a couple that was having IVF, and the lab destroyed their embryos accidentally before they could give them to the mother to have, before they could put them in her uterus. And when they destroyed them, the parents filed an unwrongful death lawsuit against them and won. The court decided that that was murder, that they destroyed the embryos. Yet today, we have this to where they can still destroy embryos and it not be called murder.
Yeah, so I think when we were talking about what we all believe is right and wrong, it was really difficult. We thought about it a lot, and I think we are all along a similar line of belief, but we have, I think, some differences. Yeah, Presley, would you like to?
Yeah, so with genetic selection, basically my beliefs is that if you, it was the parents' decision, obviously, so if you wanted to have that third-party donor to save your child's life because he was going to have AIDS, because one of the partners had AIDS, and he or she was going to have Tay-Sachs, then I believe that that was right because you were saving that life. But when you were choosing these donors and you were altering the genetics of the baby just because you had a certain image in mind, I believe that was taking it out of the hand of God because you are choosing what your baby is going to be. And I know that that does get into when you're still choosing that when you are choosing for them not to have the disease, but it is basically saving a life when you do that. So I believe that there was a line drawn between that. And that line is fuzzy, very thin, but it really is down to the parents' decision. With Save Your Siblings, I believe that it wasn't right in any circumstance because you were going to either kill that other person or they were going to live their life thinking, wow, I mean, what if that child wouldn't have gotten sick? I wouldn't be here. And I am totally reliant on their actions, whether or not I live and what happens to me. And not only for them, but there are also psychological things that are involved with the child that is being saved. I mean, if they know that this child was killed or this child was only made because they were going to die, then that has to put psychological strain on that child. So I believe that there are other alternatives to saving children, and I do not believe that this is a healthy alternative. With excess embryos, like I said, the court ruled that it was murder, and they are babies that are developing, they are embryos, and I believe that abortion is wrong. So yes, the destruction of embryos, I do believe is wrong, and there are other alternatives to getting pregnant, and there's adoption. So I don't believe that this procedure, IVF, because it relies on the destruction of embryos. I mean, if you are going to do it, I think the good alternatives would be to give them up to another woman to birth. And I mean, they are being destroyed, so if they are destroyed, I mean, I believe that stem cell research would be much better than just taking them to bury or just destroying them. But yes, I do believe overall that the destruction of embryos is wrong.
Okay, so I'm not sure. I don't have like a belief for all of them. I thought about it a lot, and as far as people saying, are you playing God or are you taking God out of the picture, or you try to whatever. I don't think that exists. I don't think you can play God. I don't think you can take something out of God's hand. I just don't think you can. I think if I am a mother who, even with genetics, if I want my baby to look a certain way, I don't think that's playing God. I think that's just using the technology, because God can do a lot more than that. And yeah, as far as it being legal versus non-legal, I thought about it a lot, and with access embryos and save your siblings, when you are killing an embryo that would become a baby, I think that's murder, and I think that's wrong. So I think that should be illegal. That shouldn't happen. As far as genetic selection, where people are saying you shouldn't be able to customize your baby, but you should be able to customize if they have a disease and you want to take that out of the picture. I don't think you can draw a line between what is legal and what is not. I don't think you can say it's okay for them to have a third-party donor if that baby is going to have, say, like cystic fibrosis, but it should not be illegal if you want to have a third-party donor because you want your baby to be more attractive. I don't think you can draw that line. I don't think there's one person who can make that line. I think as a Christian, I think that's where wisdom comes in, personally, and I think that it's technology. God gave us the ability to use it, and if you think it's wrong, don't do it. But that's up to what you believe in. Yeah. So overall, I think besides killing a baby for another baby, I think it's really up to the person and what they believe in personally.
So I think it's a really, really hard subject, and it's really hard for me. And I can't say that I came to like a sure conclusion, but I think one of the things I ran into when I was searching Save Your Siblings is the first one that was successfully done. They put it in the newspaper, and the heading was "Unto us a child was born." And it was just like really hard for me to hear that, because it's like they're playing, or it's like Jesus came for us and he died for us and he did all these, he was beaten and bruised and marred, and they likened that to a child who was, who they like genetically messed with and stuff like that. So I think it's wrong to do Save Your Siblings. I think it's wrong to destroy embryos, but I think genetic selection is, some people forget that it's like, it's basically what Hitler did. During the Holocaust, he killed off everyone who had, these diseases and like who had Down syndrome and stuff like that. He like weeded them all out, and he was weeding out all the Jews and the people he didn't like the physical features of. So I think a lot of times genetic selection can be very selfish, and it can play with stuff like Hitler did. So I can't say that it should be made illegal or legal, but I wouldn't personally do it. I personally wouldn't do assisted reproduction. I just adopt. That's my view.
All right, and here is our work cited. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Wow, this is a big subject. What do you guys think? Adoption? Hands up, who would do adoption? Would anybody do assisted?
My wife wanted to. I don't know the situation.
I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah. What about Hannah? Now this is not going to happen, but I'm just saying. Hannah gets ovarian cancer tomorrow. And it has to be treated. But her parents are very wise, and the counselor, the cancer oncologist counsel her and say, we're going to have to give you chemo, but what we want to do is harvest your eggs and keep them for when you're older and married and can do all this. And you're going to have to surrogate. We're going to have to give you a complete hysterectomy. We're going to have to surrogate, but we want you to have your eggs. Is that different? You're going to surrogate it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I mean, I believe. Yeah, I believe it is. I believe that is exactly the same as the other methods of assisted reproduction. There's really no difference, and I think I believe God gave us the technology, and I realize that there are children that need to be adopted now that are already born, but I think God has the same plan for their lives as He does for a child in this instance. So really, like I said, I can't draw the line to where it's legal or illegal, but I think it just comes up to wisdom and what you believe personally. So I would say yes, it's okay.
So basically what you're saying is you would take the eggs of the mother and have someone else?
I would harvest them from you, and you can harvest them from children, all our eggs are made actually in our mothers. When we're in utero in our mother, it's the legacy of the ages. That's when our eggs are made. Now, guys are producing sperm all the way through, but women actually, these develop in utero. So your mother impacted growth of your eggs. So you can actually harvest those eggs from when, say you had childhood cancer, and they took them, when you were 7 or 8. They put them and cryogenically freeze them, and then they start the IVF. When you get married and you decide to,
But if you've had a hysterectomy, you can't have the child yourself.
you'd have to surrogate it somewhere else.
So that means someone else would have
Your
your child.
child.
But then it would still be your child.
Yes.
If someone
They're
else
just hosting it.
So interesting.
How would you feel about that? I mean, I've made it personal for you. How would you feel about it?
I don't know. It's, on one hand, I would just say, well, just adopt. But at the same time, like, you want a personal thing with your children. Like, you want it to be your child, not someone else's at the same time. Like,
So here's
personally,
another
you
thing.
never had a personal.
If your parents, because you've had this done, say when you're 7, your parents have made that decision for you, and they don't tell you until you're an adult, and now you've got these eggs sitting in frozen somewhere, and you're broke. You gonna sell them? You can make money legally. Yeah. One of the best ways to make money in college, guys, is to go and donate sperm.
How much?
$1 million.
You can donate
Yep.
eggs too, can't you? You can donate eggs too.
Yes, you can. But here's some questions to think about. Is that okay? Now, think about also the excess embryos and things. Think about all these excess embryos with genetic profiles around, okay? All these excess sperm donated things. We're reducing our gene pool significantly if we only use this pool of donated items. Does that make sense? So we're more susceptible to disease and all sorts. Did you disagree with any of them? Hmm?
I think the sibling one is definitely wrong.
Is it a sibling sibling? What, I mean, can I imagine doing that? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine doing it to save a child of mine. And I love children, so I can have another one. Big deal. What's the big deal? What is the big deal?
Killing a child.
Murder.
But maybe you still want the baby. You just happen to harvest the right stem cells as well, just take a few of them.
It's still the idea that you had the child to save the child.
What if you still want it? Like you
You
want to
It
have
still
it.
comes down to that, like, if you weren't gonna originally have a child.
What
What if
if
you
like
were
I was an
originally
accident?
going to
Like my parents didn't want to have me,
Yeah.
or all my siblings, because my mom wasn't supposed to have kids, because she had cancer. So, the first one was like, okay, how that happened. Second one was like, okay, maybe we can do this. Third one was like, I didn't even want that kid. Stop the kid.
So how do you feel about that?
I'm fine. I'm happy. They love me.
Allie, I took 6 pregnancy tests before I told Colin because I could not believe that we were pregnant. Antibiotics, guys. And so she was a mistake, so to speak. But no, the minute I knew that I was pregnant and the minute that Colin knew that she was coming, we were just so deliriously happy. And I can't imagine being pregnant, even with a saviour sibling, and not being amazingly happy about that baby that's growing.
It also depends on what you have to harvest from the child.
Yes.
I mean, if it's gonna be like a major organ they can't survive without, then you have to.
Then you're, the
If
happiness
it's
is
just
kind
like
of
use stem
limited.
cells, then you'd be fine, but I mean,
Yeah.
it depends what you have to harvest from.
Yeah,
You're harvesting the heart then.
you put it away.
Well, even like in the Movie My Sister's Keeper, I mean, they still play about having another child, they're just
they still kept the child and they just took her bone marrow. And so like, that's not something like taking her bone marrow, that's usually not gonna kill somebody.
But it had a major impact on her psychological well-being later on, didn't it?
Yeah.
On all of them. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of variables that are different for each situation.
I think so
Because
too.
there's a lot of kids that you could want the baby, but they may not, believe it, and they may, choose to believe that they were just.
But even if you're not one of those kids, I mean, kids still believe that their parents don't want them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So there's like
yeah, you
so
could do
many
that.
variables.
So what about Adam's point that God is bigger than all of this, and we can wish and wash around all this technology and decide we're going to have a savior sibling, and if God decides yes or no, that baby is still in His plan.
I disagree with that to a certain extent because yes, God allowed us to create the technology, but He's allowed us to do a lot of things in it, right?
Like nuclear wars, really.
Yeah, like I feel like He's allowed us to do things, yes, but that doesn't mean we should take advantage of all the things He's allowed us to do. Just because we can do it doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
right.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should.
I think the point is that even if you do it, He planned for that.
Yeah, so no
That
matter what
doesn't
the
mean
result is,
I
it's
can
part
go
of
murder
His
someone.
plan.
That doesn't mean
He
how,
planned
but
for
when
that.
are you drawing the line of like, you're just walking in the loop?
Yeah.
Like, yes, grace is here and the Lord's given us so much grace, but if we just walk in and say, I have sex tomorrow, I'm like, oh, there's grace, it will be okay,
Yeah.
but I'm going to have sex
But
tomorrow.
you won't,
Yeah.
but if you're believing that, then are you following God, and is that even a variable?
Right.
So I'm saying, like, to a non-Christian, why would why would, like, this
Why
is
would it
amazing.
matter?
Yeah, like, why would it matter at all?
It's just random.
And then to a Christian, I think, like what I mean by like you can't take something out of God's hand is like, you can't, it's not like God saying, I didn't want that baby to happen and you had it anyways. Like that's never gonna happen. Like that's impossible. Like when the doctor said you're not gonna have any children to my mom, like God, like that wasn't His plan, and it's the
Yeah.
exact opposite too. And that's not gonna happen. So yeah, I think as playing God, like you can't play God, like you just can't. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think sometimes people bring Him down to the level where we could even play.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Put it in a box.
humanize them, yeah, because we don't know how, I personally don't know how to understand the immensity of it. And, I mean, I get glimpses of it, but I can't understand it. Okay, let's talk about their presentation. Let's say a couple of nice things about it.
I thought it was very clean, very nice, not a lot of clarity stuff.
Had you practiced?
It is that you're a pro. Yeah,
It's easy
yeah,
to
presentations.
practice a
He
lot.
segues very nicely.
Yeah.
I will say you need to make a little bit more eye contact.
Me or all of us?
Well, more or less all of you.
I think the color of the presentation.
Yeah,
was
yeah,
a little
it's
bit
not
darker.
hard to see.
What would you say about the presentation?
I liked the color.
Well, I think the text was a little too
The color
dark.
is a lot different.
It was
The black
really
text
big,
was hard to read.
So here's an FYI, you need high contrast for anything that you show through a projector. High contrast means not too dark colors.
It might have been fixed if you had made the letters a little bold, like more bold, but they're just really thin and it was hard to
Yeah, it
see.
was hard to.
Like the white was fine, just the black was hard.
Okay, so what about this dancing with the bottle that Adam's got going?
Yeah, the bottle.
Did that distract?
No?
Yeah, when you're dancing with it, shaking around, like dancing a little bit more. You have to be really careful with where your hands are, which is why it's good to actually have a clicker or something in your hand, or a note card or something.
I just don't want to look like a robot.
I know,
This
because you
is
sound like
sister
this.
I know,
Grace.
that's right.
And
Sister
like
Grace.
Kayla's doing the come by us way.
I'm sorry.
I'm just happy to be here.
You know, and it's very difficult, but that's a good point for everybody here is when you're in a team, you decide beforehand where you're going to stand and how the dynamics of the speech goes. Because I like the way it worked between you. That was very good. Anything else that you really liked? Marissa? You've got your thoughtful face on.
You like
I liked how ordered it was. I liked the look of the Prezi. And you guys really knew what you were talking about.
Yes, that was evident, the research.
Everything.
Yeah.
And then you had different examples. Like you didn't just read about that. Like Kayla, you kind of drew parallels between Hitler and the other thing. I forgot you drew parallels. And then you had different examples. Oh, the article.
Oh, yeah.
The article. I thought that was cool. So you thought about the topic.
Okay, something that they can improve on.
expanding on before you go into them, because you explain them, and then you kind of went and explain them again. Maybe just briefly show what they are, and then go into it.
That's a good point, but anyone watch £7? When he says, you go in and you say what you're going to say, then you tell them what you're going to say, you say what you're going to say, and then you tell them what you said. So that's a presentation technique of where you emphasize and then you emphasize and then you emphasize. I do that a lot because at some point you'll zone out and hopefully it'll get you at one point. And so sometimes that can be good, but sometimes it can be too much. What else? Josh, tell me something.
I thought you guys were pretty thorough. That was good. Considering the topic, you weren't too entirely awkward once you guys got going. It was-
Kayla was. You found it awkward to say, like, intercourse stuff.
I did not.
And we
It's like
practice using intercourse, I don't know how.
We did not.
So many.
Shout it.
I could say it, and of course.
So, if you're in a presentation team and you have to say something awkward, then give it to somebody who doesn't find it awkward to say it, and you use something else, okay? It's really important because that really takes away from the strength of your presentation, Kayla, was that you knew what you were talking about, and you took away from it by being awkward.
Social skills.
We still love you. That was awesome. Anything else, Kayla? Do you want to say anything?
On the definitions, two of them sounded extremely familiar. I think it was like the second and fourth of the different kinds. I don't know if they're meant to be really similar, that's just, they sounded like the same thing.
Well, here.
That's a religion.
Who's the second?
There, the terminology.
I can't read it, but when you're talking about it, there's the second and third types.
Oh, they are very similar.
They sound or they sound
Say,
One, you're injecting the sperm into the egg,
and
in
then
a
this one's
petri
you're
dish.
injecting the sperm into the uterus.
Into the uterus.
I thought you talked about injecting the sperm into the uterus twice, that's what.
I understood. I feel like that.
Okay, so be very distinct about it.
I just heard.
Okay, and what about visuals? Do you think it would be necessary for us to see a visual of like a petri dish with some eggs in it?
I think it could have helped, but it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
necessary.
like the clarity of it. I like the clarity of it. Well done. Awesome. Awesome job. Good. I've got everything graded apart from these guys. So let's collect up the forms and then let's start our